is a matter of vital importance to the state, a matter of life or death for the people, and the security or ruin of the nation. It is therefore mandatory that it be thoroughly studied. One must analyze it in terms of 5 fundamental factors, and compare the conditions of both sides to assess their relative strengths. Only then can one foresee the outcome of a battle. These 5 aspects include the way, heaven, earth, the commander, and doctrine. Among these, dia, terrain, refers to the factor of geographical advantage. This involves assessing whether the roads are long or short, the terrain is treacherous or level, the combat area is vast or narrow, and whether the topography is favorable for attack, defense, advancement, or retreat. Even in the current context, geopolitical factors remain a primary concern for major powers. Rather than engaging in direct warfare, merely maintaining military bases in strategic locations allows them to display their weapons and strength, enough to give opponents pause and force them to back down. It is for this reason that major powers like the United States and China have invested billions of dollars in building military outposts to establish strategic island chains. Among these, the U.S. island chain strategy is currently considered the most superior. The island chain strategy is a maritime containment plan proposed in 1951 by the American statesman, John Foster Dulles. John Foster Dulles was a key figure in the early Cold War period. He was known as a staunch advocate of a global anti-communist stance. Foster Dulles was present at nearly every major event of the 20th century, including the Versailles Peace Conference, the Dawes Plan, and the establishment of the post-World War II peace order. In particular, it was Dulles who, in the 1950s, proposed that the U.S. government should limit French influence in Vietnam. Returning to the island chain strategy, as it was formed during the Cold War, its purpose was to encircle the Soviet Union and China through a system of naval bases in the Western Pacific. Through a show of military force, while simultaneously limiting these two countries' access to maritime routes. Although the concept of island sovereignty did not become a key geopolitical topic during the Cold War period. But after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, this issue became a focal point in the geopolitical and military analyses of both the United States and China, and it remains highly relevant to this very day. For the United States, the island chain strategy is an important component of military force deployment in the Far East region. For China, this concept plays an essential role in maritime security, stemming from concerns about the risk of being strategically encircled by U.S. armed forces. For both sides, the Brush Island strategy emphasizes the geographical and strategic importance of Taiwan Island. Master Island, looking at the chain of islands in the Western Pacific such as Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Guam, one can see they possess a particularly crucial strategic position in terms of maritime affairs. Much like national defense is for countries in the region, particularly major powers such as Russia, Japan, the United States, and China. Therefore, as early as the colonial era, when the world map was gradually being completed, the great powers began to establish governance systems on the islands they occupied in the Pacific Ocean. Their goal was to transform these places into a tightly interconnected chain of islands. The perspectives of Germany and Japan on the island chain. Germany is considered a pioneering nation in researching and assessing the strategic value of island nations in the Pacific region. According to the renowned scholar Ernest Hollshofer, whose geopolitical concepts profoundly influenced the formation of Adolf Hitler's ideology, the offshore island chains in the Pacific and Indian Ocean regions will act as a shield, protecting continental powers like India and China. Japan is becoming the center of attention. After defeating the Qing dynasty in the Sino-Japanese War of 1895 and the Russian Empire in the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 1905. At the beginning of the 20th century, this nation rose to become the leading maritime power in the Pacific. And to assert its status and stature, this national government has begun to focus on researching the strategic value offered by the islands and archipelagos in the Western Pacific. From that point, the land of the rising sun gradually turned its gaze southward to seek a prosperous colony of its own. With the abundant natural resources that a resource-poor country like Japan always has high demand for. Additionally, the southward expansion also helped Japan broaden its market while simultaneously creating an additional protective shield for the southern part of the country, which was under threat from the United States. As early as World War I, Japan declared war and successfully seized control of several islands in the Micronesian archipelago. This includes the Mariana, Marshall, Caroline, and Palau archipelagos, which were formerly part of the German Empire in the west. These islands are not only the first foundational stones in the southward strategy, but also serve as a crucial strategic buffer zone. The control of the Micronesian archipelago would provide Japan with a solid defensive shield, a fact that has been proven. To prevent the possibility that the United States could use its military bases in Guam or the Philippines to threaten Japan in the future. It is for this reason that since World War I, on the surface, the United States and Japan have continued to cooperate with each other. But in reality, there has always been mutual wariness between the parties on many issues, most notably the struggle for influence in the Western Pacific Ocean. Concern is also America. At that time, the White House was concerned that Japan would seek to control part of the archipelago, a factor that had been one of the causes of the earlier Spanish-American War. Around 1910–1911, U.S. military strategists suspected that one day, Japan would threaten the island of Guam and the Philippine archipelago. Subsequently, Washington officials in the post-World War I era were concerned about the possibility of a direct clash between the two powers in the Western Pacific waters. U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Earl Hancock, Pete Ellis demonstrated to the government that the islands occupied by Japan skillfully created the necessary military outposts to support Tokyo in blockading the trans-Pacific sea lanes over a distance of up to more than 3,700 kilometers. Through this, Ellis argued that the U.S. Navy needed to seize these islands and establish forward bases to sustain extended combat operations in more distant areas. Ellis also placed great emphasis on the occupation of Guam. During World War II in the Pacific Theater, just as Ellis had predicted, the U.S. Navy had to exert tremendous effort to hold the strongpoints on the islands they had captured, and simultaneously penetrate the island chains where Japan has established control. Admiral Ernest King also believed that controlling Taiwan would enable the United States to tighten its grip and dominate the entire South China Sea region throughout World War II. Thereby, Japan's vital maritime routes and its supply of oil and critical minerals would be directly threatened. This was a decisive factor in the outcome of this transoceanic war. The victory in the Western Pacific Campaign led American strategists to begin re-evaluating the strategic value of island chains in the context of a new war. It was during this period that the formal concepts related to the new island chain strategy were developed and clearly defined. Washington's strategy was built upon a crucial study conducted by the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1948. With the aim of establishing a defensive perimeter, this system runs from the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, extends down to Japan, then through Taiwan, and on to the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur was one of the key figures in shaping the geopolitical character of the island chains in the early Cold War period. He asserted that the United States must establish a strike force along the U-shaped area, stretching from the Aleutian Islands to Midway Island. This island was once under the control of Imperial Japan, then transferred through Clark Air Base in the Philippines, and most notably, Okinawa. MacArthur also likened Taiwan to an unsinkable aircraft carrier and submarine base, serving the strategy of attacking Allied supply lines in Okinawa and the Philippines. From these strategically located island chains, General MacArthur asserted that the western border of the United States had now been extended far beyond the nation's west coast. The United States had the capability to use its air and naval forces to control key Asian seaports, stretching from Vladivostok to Singapore. At the same time, it is necessary to prevent hostile actions that risk spreading across the Pacific region as is currently happening. On the Chinese side, policymakers from the world's most populous nation often reference 20th-century American perspectives to formulate their own strategies. Chinese experts often cite statements from the wartime period, emphasizing the necessity of establishing the proposed defense perimeter that had been advocated by figures like MacArthur, Dean Acheson, or John Foster Dulles. Strategic island chain. China's current strategic thinking emphasizes a perspective once employed by the United States during the early phase of the war's ability to expand its influence and restrict the freedom of operation for the Chinese Navy in the Western Pacific region. This is viewed as a direct threat to China. In addition, China also expressed concern that these island chains could be used by the US military as a springboard to conduct military operations in areas where China is asserting its sovereignty. According to the assessment of Rear Admiral Zhang Zhaozhang, Guam holds a pivotal strategic position, enabling the US to rapidly deploy aircraft and submarines to establish battlefield order. In contrast to the above views, some Chinese scholars instead see these island chains as strategic footholds for the country's military operations. Such perspectives are typically more prevalent among naval strategists. First island chain. But in the interview, former Admiral Liu stated that China needs to prepare to advance to the second island chain, including the Mariana Islands, Guam, and Palau. Chinese media also frequently emphasizes and highlights this viewpoint. For some, these island outposts have become significant milestones in the Chinese Navy's development toward realizing its goal of becoming a blue water navy, capable of projecting power both in peacetime and during conflict. 3 U.S. pivot strategies. Currently, the competition between the US and China is becoming increasingly intense. However, in terms of clearly establishing strategic island chains, thus far, only the US has successfully achieved this with 3 consecutive island chains. First is the First Island Chain. The First Island Chain is currently identified as beginning from the Russian Kuril Islands in the Sea of Okhotsk near Sakhalin, then extending through Japanese territory, the Ryukyu Islands, the island of Taiwan, the northwestern part of the Philippines, including the islands of Luzon, Mindoro, and Palawan, and ending in the northern area of the island of Borneo. Thus, the First Island Chain stretches from the Kuril Islands in the northeast to the area near Borneo. This is the very first island chain that forms one of the 3 strategic island chain doctrines in U.S. foreign policy. The majority of this chain lies adjacent to maritime areas claimed by China, including both the South China Sea and the East China Sea to the west. Unsinkable aircraft carrier. Maritime defensive layer, aimed at containing China. Second island chain. This island chain has 2 different interpretations, but the most common understanding refers specifically to the chain formed by Japan's Ogasawara Islands, Iwo Jima, the Mariana Islands, the Caroline Islands, and extending to western New Guinea. This island chain serves as the eastern maritime boundary of the Philippines. In the second island chain, Guam is the sentinel island in an area of immense global strategic importance. Looking at the map, we can easily recognize the pivotal position of Guam. To the east, this island is more than 6,000 kilometers from Honolulu, the capital of Hawaii. Meanwhile, looking towards Northeast and Southeast Asia, Guam is only about 2,650 kilometers from Okinawa, a key U.S. military base in Japan. The Spratly Islands territory is located less than 3,000 kilometers away, and is also only 2,700 kilometers from Taiwan Island. Furthermore, Guam is situated just approximately 2,600 kilometers east of Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Although located far from U.S. territory, it takes less than 6 hours to fly from Guam to key areas in the Asia-Pacific region. At the same time, the island also serves as a vital maritime hub connecting the Far East, the Australian continent, and Southeast Asia. Precisely because of this strategic position, Guam becomes a vulnerable target for potential attacks from the Pacific region. Militarily, the island of Guam is under the jurisdiction of the Mariana Islands Military Command. This agency controls approximately 29% of the island's area, equivalent to 156.6 square kilometers. Currently, this area includes Naval Base Guam and Andersen Air Force Base, while the entire island is an organized, unincorporated territory of the United States. This island chain will extend from Alaska's Aleutian Islands, through the Hawaiian Islands, the U.S. territory of American Samoa and the Republic of Fiji, to the Tongan Archipelago and New Zealand. In this third island chain, the trio of New Zealand, Tonga, and Hawaii plays an especially crucial role. Although Tonga is only a small island nation with a modest land area of 748 square kilometers, it possesses a very extensive exclusive economic zone, reaching 676,401 square kilometers. This location lies 1,800 kilometers northeast of New Zealand and approximately 5,000 kilometers southwest of the Hawaiian Islands. Therefore, this region is currently drawing particular attention from U.S. officials, as Tonga is receiving investments from China, which aims to pull the island nation to its side and weaken the United States' strategic position. In reality, this island chain trio has undergone significant fluctuations and changes. A notable example is after 1954, when the Geneva Accords were signed. Vietnam was divided into two regions with the 17th parallel serving as the boundary. North of the 17th parallel was the territory of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, while the south belonged to the Republic of Vietnam. According to the Geneva Accords, the Paracel and Spratly Islands were placed under the administration of the Republic of Vietnam government. This regime was essentially a product established by the United States. Therefore, in practice, both the Saigon government and the U.S. jointly managed these two archipelagos. Therefore, at that time, the first island chain of the United States also included the Paracel and Spratly Islands, with its endpoint being the coastal area near present-day Da Nang City. When looking at the map of the first island chain, at first glance, we hardly notice anything unusual. However, upon closer observation, it becomes apparent that the curve running from the island of Taiwan to the waters off Da Nang aligns rather closely with the arbitrary 9-dash line. It is noteworthy that the precursor to this line was the 11-dash line, a proposal originally put forward by Taiwan. Currently, as we all know, China is resorting to every possible means to legitimize the 9-dash line in the South China Sea. Returning to the first island chain, it can be affirmed that the American side will never gain control of the entire island chain. After the Paris Peace Accords on ending the war and restoring peace in Vietnam were signed in 1973, the White House withdrew all American troops from Vietnam. Then, in 1974, the Republic of Vietnam lost the Paracel Islands to China, an event for which the U.S. side was partly responsible. Next, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam unified the country and promptly took over the Spratly Islands in 1975. Following these events, the United States' first island chain now only extends as far as North Borneo, as we see it today. For this very reason, many experts have recommended that the Washington administration establish a fourth and fifth island chain. The fourth island chain will begin at Pakistan's Wada port, pass through the Lakshadweep Islands, and reach the city of Hambantota in Sri Lanka, and extending all the way to Mandipur and Diego Garcia. Despite its significant influence in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, China is facing internal instability in both countries, stemming from the debt trap it created along with various other factors. For its part, the U.S. could still target these two key port cities and is seeking opportunities to help them break free from China's grip. The fifth island chain is expected to be deployed from the U.S. base in the Gulf of Aden, focusing on the Horn of Africa region. Subsequently, it sailed along the East African coast, passed through the Mozambique Channel, and headed toward South Africa with the intention of encircling the Chinese naval base in Durale, Djibouti. Although the fourth and fifth island chains remain at the proposal stage and have not yet been implemented in practice, China's vigorous promotion of the Belt and Road Initiative makes these plans noteworthy. And with security agreements already established with many regions around the world, such as the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu, it is time for the United States to further consolidate these two island chains. Vietnam is one of the countries that has suffered significant losses in the competition over the island chain. From its earliest days, the People's Republic of China found itself surrounded by the United States at sea. This very reality drove Beijing to make relentless efforts to break out of this encirclement. To break the encirclement, the most crucial area is the East Sea, home to Vietnam's Paracel and Spratly archipelagos. Since 1972, during U.S. President Richard Nixon's term, relations between the United States and China began to gradually warm. From this point onward, Chinese strategists have been able to access and study strategic perspectives on the island chain constructed by the U.S. since the 20th century. A prime example is how this billion-strong nation has utilized MacArthur's arguments to turn Taiwan Island into a target for future occupation or to advance claims over islands in the East China Sea. However, the event considered the starting point for China's illegal construction of artificial island chains was the occupation of the Paracel Islands, then under the administration of the Republic of Vietnam, in 1974. An incident met with indifference by the United States. Island chain's naval power as well as its ability to operate freely throughout the Western Pacific region. This directly threatens the maritime security of an area with a population exceeding half of the world. In addition, China believes that these island chains will become a springboard for the US military to conduct operations in areas where Beijing asserts its sovereignty. As mentioned earlier, Rear Admiral Zhang Zhaozhang assessed that Guam holds a strategically important position, as the US can deploy aircraft and submarines from there to establish battlefield dominance. Therefore, the Chinese Navy needs to find ways to contain the power of this island. According to Admiral Liao Huaqing, before considering